Hey, everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart Podcast Network. Well, today we have a superstar. Today we have a superstar with us. This is former Sheriff David Clarke from Milwaukee County. Now, Sheriff Clarke has been a voice for law enforcement since he exploded on the scene several years ago, standing up for law enforcement, standing up for what we do every single day. And it's absolutely amazing that the sheriff would come on with. So, Sheriff, welcome aboard.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the introduction. I kind of shy away from terms like superstar and whatnot because, this isn't about me. And I'm humbled by the attention that I've received and my support of this profession that I've been involved with for over 40 years before I retired. But I still am in the fight to protect the honor, the integrity, the courage of the frontline street officer.
And you know what? I thank you so much for that because, like I said, you're an inspiration for many. I call you a superstar because you mean that much to people. You're obviously a very humble man, and I think that speaks volumes about who you are and what you're doing. So this program is brought to you by Blue 360 Media. They publish my books, The Interview and The Investigation, and also by Medical Essential Diagnostics. What we like about them is that any state worker, especially first responders, can walk into any one of their facilities and a soup to nuts physical is done. You spend the whole day there and they find out if you have anything wrong. And basically they take your insurance. If you don't have insurance, you have little insurance, they have people that pay to make sure you're healthy. So we want to make sure we thank them. So Sheriff, let me, as we start to see, I started looking online and seeing you're on Fox all the time. You're all over the place. What do you think the state of law enforcement is right now? How do you think you see it? I know we have a hard time getting people to join up and people are leaving and retiring. What do you see out there?
Yeah, it's a shameful period of time. It really is. This profession, this once proud profession, this once necessary profession, it's still necessary in a civil society, but it's been beaten down. It's been beaten down by people who hate cops. It's been beaten down by politicians who have gotten into bed with the cop haters, people like groups like Antifa, groups like Black Lives Matter, and others. And it's taken a toll. Not only are we seeing a surge in crime, street crime, and violent crime rates, but also the mental health of the law enforcement officers taking a beating as well. So that's why I felt, even though I'm retired, hey, I easily could have just walked away and said, hey, I did my time. It's somebody else's turn. Good luck. But I saw what was going on. I was still the sheriff at the time this started. Go back to the Ferguson, Missouri days where I spoke out on this. And I wasn't getting a lot of support from law enforcement executives. I was real disappointed in that, but I figured somebody's got to stand up for this profession. And as a result now of this constant wearing down, this beat down that this profession has taken, you're seeing things like depolicing. You're seeing law enforcement officers not being as assertive and as aggressive as they need to be in order to be successful in maintaining the rule of law, maintaining law and order, and keeping crime rates manageable in their jurisdiction.
Absolutely. And I have to say that, we both know, and anybody in law enforcement knows, the only thing that keeps a community safe is aggressive, proactive law enforcement work. And what I see with the media doing, and this is where I don't understand why these politicians want to jump in. We see the crime that's going on now, that the people in the cities that they seem to be so afraid of law enforcement are the ones who are being the most victimized. And I know the men and women out there want to do the right thing. They want to protect people, protect communities. And by pushing them back, we just see more and more good and decent people that are victimized. And it is one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. What do you think these politicians jump on board with this stuff for? I mean, what benefit is there to them?
Short-sightedness, political opportunity. Look, law enforcement needs political cover, I should say. And that comes in the shape of an elected official. We used to be able to rely on them to help beat back this opposition to law and order and to policing in America. But over time, These people don't have any political courage anymore. It's easier and more expedient to just jump in bed with the cop hating class. So, we dump all this. You take all of society's ills, right? You take broken homes, you take failed schools, you take drug and alcohol abuse, you take questionable lifestyle choices by our young people, like joining gangs and whatnot. And we throw this into the lap of a police officer because the elected officials who really have the responsibility of dealing with societal's ills, they don't know what to do. And so what do they say? Well, call 911. We'll let the law enforcement officer handle it. Law enforcement is not equipped for many of this stuff. We don't put broken homes back together. We don't fix failed schools. We don't prove an economy that provides jobs, good paying jobs for people within that community. Those are the things that keep a community intact. And without those sorts of things, you're going to see this surge in crime, like I said, questionable lifestyle choices, and then we just dump it on the police. So until the political class starts to do their job, and this needs to be pointed out, they're failing at their job. Government is failing at its responsibility to secure the personal safety of citizens and properly fund the police. They're taking resources away from police. They've defunded police. So you have fewer officers. You have officers leaving the force in record numbers, taking advantage of early retirement. Some are resigning before their retirement because it's just not worth it anymore. And I get that.
Right. I mean, you go out and do your job, you can get indicted. You could go to jail. People demand that we go out there in the streets and do the right thing. And then when you go do it, you have a potential of getting yourself in trouble. Now, that being said, of course, there are one or two law enforcement officers everywhere that do the wrong thing, and we got to get rid of them. We need good men and women to do the right thing. When you speak to different communities, right? You speak to different communities when you go out there and you see them. Do you see this defund the police movement and this rise in crime? Do they put the connection together that, when we look at the statistics of people who are being killed and we see the number of people killed by law enforcement, they usually bring that on themselves in some way. They resist arrest. They don't want to be arrested. They fight, they run, they shoot. And do you see that they connect that this whole anti-police thing is just leading to more danger for them? And why do they keep voting for that?
Well, let's dissect that a little bit because there's a lot there. First of all, you don't have the respect for law enforcement that you used to have when I was on the street. And I started as a street cop. I started as a frontline officer. People respected the police. People respected the rule of law. And so that helped. You don't have that anymore, which is why people so readily flee the police, high-speed pursuits, foot pursuits, which are very dangerous for law enforcement officers. You see this lack of prosecution. Then you mentioned the defund movement. There's always a lag time between the time these policies end, these failed urban policies. And I want to keep coming back to the role that the political class plays in all of this. All right, this defund movement, taking resources away from law enforcement officers who are charged with the responsibility of keeping their communities safe, keeping the peace. And now you're starting to see, because I said there's a lag time in some of this stuff, you're starting to see that some of these cities are seeing the errors of their way. But the problem is that lag time still exists on bringing it back. In other words, you've had this mass exodus of law enforcement officers out of this profession. That can't be made up overnight. I don't care if a city says we're going to provide, $100 million to hire law enforcement officers over the next, 5 years, whatever. That takes time, for heaven's sakes. You have to recruit, right? You want to make sure you get someone who's the right fit. And I see some agencies are lowering their standards just to meet recruiting goals. And so I know for instance, and this is ironic, but it's funny, but it's not funny. But the Oakland chapter, Oakland, California, the NAACP has said defunding the police was a mistake. And they're imploring the city officials in Oakland to restore this funding because of the surge in crime and violence. But you see how I said this takes time, because just a couple of years ago, you had the NAACP all over the country screaming to defund the police. But now they're seeing the errors of their ways. But it's going to take time to bring this thing back full circle.
Right. The pendulum has to swing back. And you are starting to see some of these these places that defunded everything. They took the police out. You see the crime screaming, the businesses that are closing up and leaving. Recently, I was out in San Francisco for some business. And while I was there, and it is every horror that we see on the news and hear about, they have signs everywhere. Do not leave anything in don't leave a water bottle in your car. Your window will get smashed open. No matter where you go, talking to some of the officers, like, yeah, we get about 80 of those a day. We don't even document them anymore. There's too many of them. And that's just the most mild thing. Now we're seeing these groups of people going in and cleaning out stores and taking off, and there's no consequences for it. So basically, you're telling people you can go and do it. So you're right. Well, as we see these communities come back, it's going to take time. And I think to your point about, who are we hiring? I do training. I train police officers. And one of the most popular programs we have is conducting the pre-employment background investigation. Who are we going to hire, right? Who are you going to bring into this job that's going to do the right thing, understand the community, enforce the laws properly, and make sure we don't have problems. So I think a lot of these lower standards may lead to an additional length of time that we're going to have to find out, make sure everybody we brought in is good, does the right thing, is properly trained. So I think there's still a lot of pain to go here. And I feel bad for people in communities that are just overwhelmed with crime.
Look what they're doing in Illinois and in California, for heaven's sakes, where they changed the law to allow illegal aliens to apply as law enforcement officers. I mean, this stuff is insane, for heaven's sakes. We've lost our minds. All in an attempt to, now they're going to mix in this immigration problem in with law enforcement. You can't do a background check on somebody who has no documentation. They don't even have documentation in their home country. And so you really have your background check is nothing to go by. You don't know if you're hiring members of the cartel. You don't know if you're hiring people of questionable character. And so, when I talk about these failed policies, there's another one. You're taking a bad situation and you're making it worse. You cannot let standards slip in hiring and law enforcement, or it's going to explode on you.
I 100% correct. And, right, we do have this huge population of people coming into the country. Majority of them are good and decent people, just want a better life. I get why they're coming here. But you're right. Who knows who's infiltrating these law enforcement agencies, infiltrating other things. And we're just not being smart. These politicians, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt. The average person out there that just wants to do good and wants to always look on the side of, everything, as opposed to holding a standard, holding people to a standard so that we can get the people we want. So I guess that would lead me to the question then, we've talked a little bit about what the future might be. What do you see the future for law enforcement? I mean, for the average man or woman who's out there today pushing a radio car or working in corrections, whatever they're doing out there, where do you see the future for them? Any message to them?
Well, I hate to even think about it really at this point. And, you look at my podcast, Straight Talk, I'm known for that sort of thing. I don't sugarcoat anything. I don't tell people what they want to hear. I tell them what I think they need to know. And the future of law enforcement right now is bleak. I'm not going to paint this rosy picture for people who might choose this as a career and end up either losing their lives, which can happen in this profession. It's always been the case. But I don't want that to be in vain. I don't want them to choose a profession that they go out and do the job to the best of their ability and the best of their knowledge, and through no fault of their own, something goes wrong, and next thing you know, they're facing a criminal indictment. I'm not going to tell a young person, oh yeah, you need to go for this. I tell them the truth. And it's for the current administrators in place now, the chiefs, the sheriffs, the higher ups. This is their job to figure out. I'm just going to be honest with people. And I tell people today who ask me about it, again, straight talk. I say, if you really want a career in law enforcement, go the federal route, because you're not going to be dealing with a lot of this underfunded, defunded, hatred of the profession. So I say, if you really want to, go that route, because I got to be honest with people, I'm not going to lead them into this dark place, just to speak happy talk to them. But like I said, the chiefs, the sheriffs today who are in these positions, they got to figure this recruitment out, and they got to do it fast.
Right. And it's interesting that I see, I watch all the social media spots from different police departments. I follow a lot of departments to see what's going on, keep up for my training. And I do see some advertisements that come out and say, hey, come to our department where we let you actually be a cop and we support you. I mean, that's a big message, because while a lot of people are stepping away from it, I know a lot of young people that call me up and say, hey, I'm thinking about being a cop. And I try and be honest with them as well. You know, you want them to know this is the state of what it is, but it is a profession that's different than any others. I mean, ours is a noble profession. We are out there trying to do the right thing. They do call us for everything. You know, old lady McGillicuddy's heater doesn't work and they call a cop. Same thing. People are having a problem down the street with their neighbors. They call the police for everything. It is a very noble profession to dedicate your life to, but you have to really give it consideration today and make sure you understand what agency you're going to. And for leadership, you know, people need to be a leader the way you lead. Tell the truth, stand up, and not buckle down to these politicians when it comes to this, because, you know, you're out there doing a job. And one of the things I talk about here is the whole idea of people don't want to be arrested. Okay, they don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to have to be responsible for what they did. And then an officer is in a, what are we supposed to do? Be report takers? Oh, listen, I'll tell you what, you know, sexual assault report, turn yourself in when you're comfortable with it, because I'm not going to come after you. I'm not going to arrest you, so we don't have a problem. That just leads us down a road where people are not safe in their home. People were shot at the Chicago White Sox baseball stadium recently. They don't know if it was shots from outside or inside. It's absolutely becoming absurd.
Those shots were from inside. When you look at the footage of the pictures of the section of the baseball park, that could not have come from the outside. But that's what the White Sox and Major League Baseball want you to believe. They're trying to distance themselves from this, and I know we're getting a little bit off track. But going back to the recruiting as well, the best recruiting message would be for political officials to reverse themselves on these no bail policies, for prosecutors to reverse themselves on not charging people for serious, felony and high level misdemeanors, for city councils, town boards to increase the budget of the police department. That would be an excellent recruiting tool, because you could look and say, hey, this community here, because you have to do it, like you said, community by community. If you know that community supports police, that's the one to go after. You look at Governor Ron DeSantis down in Florida that was offering $5,000 sign up upon hiring and paying moving expenses for any law enforcement officer that wanted to come to a Florida law enforcement agency. See, those are good signs anyway, that symbols that, hey, this community here, this state here, this city here, they actually support their law enforcement officers, and that's an agency that I want to work for.
I agree 110%. All right, so you mentioned your podcast, Straight Talk with America's Sheriff. Is that it? That's it. And where do we find that?
It's available on any podcast platform, all your major ones, Amazon, Shopify. I think this is Shopify, Spotify. I'm sorry. Spotify. But any major platform, you're going to find it there. Just put in the search engine, Straight Talk with America's Sheriff David Clarke, and you'll be able to find a link for it.
That's outstanding. So all of our listeners and our viewers on our YouTube channel, make sure you go over and listen to the podcast with Sheriff Clarke. Now, Sheriff, you got a book out also. Let's tell everybody about your book and where they can find that.
Sure. The title is Cop Under Fire. The subtitle is Beyond Hashtags of Race, Crime, and Politics for a Better America. And what it is it gives people a deeper dive into some of the things that I talk about that they might hear me, talk about. For instance, I'm a contributor to Newsmax TV. I do a lot of radio interviews, but you have to talk in sound bites when you're doing TV. So the book is a deeper dive into some of these issues, not just facing law enforcement, but facing society as well. Some of the things, like race politics that heavily influence political decisions and law enforcement decisions. So it's a good read. It's a quick read. You should be able to read the thing in a weekend if you wanted to. And it just gives you a better understanding. People, they see me, they hear me. And when they meet me, they say, tell me a little bit more about yourself. Well, that's what the book does.
Excellent. And what we'll do is, for everybody that's listening and watching, I will put it in the program description. So you'll have all the links to be able to get to Sheriff Clarke's book and find his podcast out there. Sheriff, I want to thank you very much for coming on. You know, the Blue Heart podcast was created for the men and women of law enforcement to bring voices to them so that they can hear each other, to speak up. So I get people emailing me, writing me, suggesting ideas, wanting to have discussions. And I'm very satisfied that, you know, after having spent my career out there in the streets doing the right thing, that I can try and bring people together. And having you come on is absolutely an honor. And I certainly appreciate it from everybody at the Blue Heart Network. Thank you, sir.
Well, I appreciate it. I think this is a lot about you as well and what you're trying to do. You're offering support. This is a support service which law enforcement officers need because of the mental health crisis this profession is undergoing too. And you know, cops like I do, right? They're only going to talk to themselves. They're only going to talk to each other. They're not going out into these other traditional outreaches for the stuff that they're dealing with. They trust cops. They trust each other. And so that's why I think the value is for what you're doing at the Blue Heart podcast.
Well, thank you very much, Sheriff. And everybody, go get the book, listen to the podcast, and look for the Sheriff. You're going to see him everywhere because he's got a lot to say. He's an important voice. And thank everybody for being here. See you down the road. Remember, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.